I convene the June 23rd, 2025 special board meeting to order at 7 p.m. Jackie, please call the roll.
Emily Swistack.
Here.
Vanessa Berry.
Here.
Debbie Bryan.
Here.
Josh Martin.
Here.
Karen Larson.
Here.
Laura Paley.
Here.
Liz Sullivan.
Here.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2 is opportunity for visitors to speak. Public comment is for the general public to address the board. Each person will have up to 5 minutes to provide public comment. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to agenda item number 3, which is the discussion of upcoming Lisle TIFs, tax increment financing districts, East Ogden TIF and Route 53 TIF, and consensus opinion / direction for the director. Tonight, we have a special guest with us, Mayor Mullen. Thank you for attending our special meeting.
Yes, of course.
Some trustees have requested that we reconvene to discuss the upcoming JRB advisory recommendation because they continue to have questions and need clarification on the TIFs. So I'm just going to read through some of the questions that were posed at our meeting last week, and then Mayor Mullen, I'll allow you to respond to them, and then some trustees might have some additional questions. That
Sounds
okay
great.
with you? Great, thank you so much. Does the East Ogden, or do the East Ogden and Route 53 TIFs satisfy the but-for test?
Yes, and the reason but-for is a little different in these cases is that they're districts rather than a project-specific TIF. So it's not like just a lot form or property where you would have a lot of information and the but-for is really specific. This at a district level is a policy question. Do you believe that the area, the entire district could be redeveloped within the goals of the village in a reasonable amount of time? And I think we've shown that whole area, there are vacant areas and blighted areas that have been there for a very long time and nothing's happened, Lock Farmer especially. There have been 3 potential developers in the past that have come forward and started to look at the property, and all of them fell through because their banks were just scared of the history of that site. So that there's a vacant parcel that somebody gave public comment on across from the post office. All these individual pieces that make up the full district that have not been redeveloped in 10, 20, 30 years.
Thank you. So that's the East Ogden. What about the Route 53 one?
Route 53 is similar. It is the area that is prone to flooding that's vacant currently, has interest in the Honda. They would like to go across the street and rebuild over there. But there's a lot of costs associated with it, with that property, that are prohibitive to development, mostly around the floodplain and an emerging wetland in that area. So if we want to have that 53 corridor revitalized, there's going to need to be incentive in that area, and it's sat vacant since at least the flood in 2013. I think there was some stuff going in that area that like, there was talk of stuff happening, and nothing. I haven't heard of anyone coming forward to that area. And there's also businesses that you probably would expect are doing great, but aren't. I know we're meeting with the owner of the Hyatt coming up because that Hyatt is really, really struggling. That office corridor has changed, without having the business there that we had originally had and had anticipated growing. The Hyatt is struggling, and that property probably will end up getting redeveloped at some point. And this allows that redevelopment to happen in the same way, that no one's going to come forward and come after that space unless there's an incentive to do it, because it would be a significant lift to redevelop that parcel.
Thank you. Do any of the library trustees have a question for Mayor Mullen on that topic before I move on to the next question that we had from last Wednesday? Okay. All right, then I'll move on to the next one. Will the village use village funds to address streetscaping, stormwater, etc.? And if so, will that reduce the size of the TIF?
So one of the things that I've put out there is, that in the very first joint review board, that was a source of consternation. The expansive nature of the district, being a corridor along Ogden, would allow us to use increment funding for streetscaping. But I think there was a very legitimate point made by the other governing bodies that we had the opportunity to do that 8 years ago, and as a village, we chose not to. Granted, I had nothing to do with that, but it's a very fair assessment. So streetscaping along there using increment funding is not something the village will do. So I'm taking that off the table. I'd like to still be able to address stormwater issues and things like that make the sites currently difficult to develop, that we could reduce the flooding footprint and then create more space that would be developable. That's more of the type of use that we would use for public benefit. Otherwise, most of that $20 million out of the 32.5 that's in the East Ogden TIF, that's available for public improvements, would be going towards incentivizing the developer or whatever developers come forward.
Thank you. Do any of the library trustees have questions for Member Mullen on that one? Okay, thank you. The next one, you mentioned it a little bit already, but are there specific plans for the use of the TIF funds for East Ogden? I know you just mentioned like the stormwater and things like that, but is there anything
Yeah,
else
so
to add?
stormwater, we have a stormwater master plan that identified some opportunities in that area to reduce flooding. The primary driver for this really is the Lock Farmer property. And we do have interest in that site right now. There is, since I've been in any elected capacity where I kind of like knew stuff that was happening, there have been 3 unsuccessful attempts, and this developer has gotten farther than anyone else has yet. I'm not sure if they have an LOI in place or if they're in the process of negotiating still, but they do have Hamilton partners on board to help them through the development process. And they've been speaking with both Eric Ertmode, in his role as previously as village manager and now as economic development director, and to Jeff Cook, our village manager, frequently about their progress. So there's definitely interest in that space. And then we know that there's other development opportunities. Like I mentioned, the owner of the vacant parcel across from the post office would like to do something. So he's another person that may come forward and ask for incentive to get it with the developer to get that redeveloped. But right now, Lock Farmer is the primary one that's come forward. There are other things happening in that area, like the Quick Trip. They've already closed on the property, I found out. And they have a lease back with the Windows place for up to 3 years. So they may not be moving forward for a while still. So.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any library trustees have any further questions on that topic?
Do you have an estimate on how much some of the remediation at that Lock Farmer site is going to cost?
So in terms of remediation, there shouldn't be any
Okay.
further remediation. EPA cleared it
Okay.
to it's as safe as it's ever gonna be, essentially.
Oh boy. Yeah.
You know, and I can't remember who I was talking to, but I gave them the example of, so when I had breast cancer, at the end of treatment, they come back with, you have no evidence of disease. They're never gonna say I'm cancer-free, but they say there's no evidence of disease. It's the same thing here, that they have pumped it out and gotten rid of the plume as much as they possibly can, but it's also underground walled off, so there can't be any movement. They just don't want you to disturb it lower than 5 feet underground, just so you don't bring up any of the hazardous soils or anything like that.
Okay.
But it still scares the heck out of banks.
Oh yeah.
You know, they look at it
Absolutely.
and they're like, no.
Yep.
So,
So, questions, Vanessa?
What have you heard from developers and like what kind of projects they would like to use the TIP money for?
so at the Lock Farmer site, one of the very likely thing would be a data center. It's directly adjacent to a substation, so it's a really good siting for a data center. In the past, some of the things that have come over to us also, I think the coolest one was a outdoor experiential, build you a really cool patio, and they were gonna have an outdoor showroom. So think of like outdoor patios in IKEA form, you know, something like that, where again, they didn't have to dig, you don't need a deep foundation or anything. And like I said, the Quick Trip is adjacent to the Speedway, and then there's somebody who's talking to us right now that is looking at potentially purchasing the 2 office buildings that kind of go set deep, and Dooley, his one is in the corner right there adjacent, next to Lock Farmer. There's a potential developer there for like a car self-storage kind of place, but that's super early discussions, and I don't think that's something that would be utilizing the TIF. They're just investigating now if they even want to do it. So that's all we know right now.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions on that? Okay. What is the financial impact to the Lisle Library District residents outside of the TIF? And then also residents of the Meadows and Sticky Broad and Four Lakes who pay into the Lisle Library District, but not the Village of Lisle.
So the best way I can think of to describe it is, there's a good slide here. Boop. This increment is what doesn't get returned back to the taxing districts as it redevelops and grows.
Mhm.
So everybody is still getting the current frozen EAV tax rate. Whatever little bit of increment there might have been without redevelopment would be the piece that wouldn't be returned back to you guys and to all of the taxing bodies. So that has been under CPI for the last 3 years. And part of the way of mitigating that is I've offered any of the taxing bodies that want to pursue it to do an intergovernmental agreement, and we would do 2% year after year over the frozen and return that to the taxing bodies so that you guys aren't missing out on the currently developed like Bill K and Speedway properties that will continue to have some small increment just based on natural growth. That gets, of course, spread across your entire district, not just the village portion. So, there's a little bit of balancing out outside of the village proper. It is something, though, I would say is utilized by all towns. I actually had lunch with the mayor of Roselle today, and we had a District 2 DuPage Mayors and Managers meeting, and every single mayor and manager there had been going through TIFs in the last few years, including Woodridge, including our neighbors. And while we may be doing one here, we're going to, inside the village, we'll probably also pay for ones that are happening other towns that we don't overlap with, right? That maybe you got your district and other districts expand into.
Right.
So it's kind of a constant give and take. The other aspect of this is when you're looking at it financially, there's a lot of moving parts. So if honing in on just the TIF alone is kind of hard to say that's how it's going to end up, because we have UTI TIF they've hit their cap. We're closing it out this year, and all the surplus will be returned to all the taxing bodies. So this year, as UTI closes out, there'll be a surplus returned. And then, that one comes off the books entirely. So that, and you're getting that full new increment at UTI. So then that's, coming back up into next year for all the taxing bodies also. So because there's multiple going on at once in different stages, as one rolls off, you're kind of seeing that return on investment with UTI as this one takes off.
Thank you. Any questions on that? Okay. Already talked about that one. Okay. So does anyone have any other questions for the mayor? I know she has to get to another place. I don't know if she needs to be here for when we continue our conversation or not. Okay.
Yeah. Just
So
as
if
long
anyone
as-
has any other questions for the mayor before she leaves to go to her next meeting? No? Okay.
Thank you
so
so
much
much.
for
Thank you.
today. We really appreciate
If you
it.
do need anything, text me, and I can text you back from over there.
Thank you so much
Thank you,
for your
thank
time.
you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. So at our last meeting on Wednesday, we talked about the two TIFs, the East Ogden TIF and the Route 53 TIF. And on both of those TIFs, we said we would vote no because we needed more information. So now that we have asked questions of the mayor, gotten some responses back, let's look at them separately again. So for the East Ogden TIF, do we feel like our questions have been answered? Are we feeling like we are ready to say, to officially say how we feel? Or do we still feel like, we had the opportunity to ask more questions. We all just said no, we didn't have any additional questions. So I feel like we're in a position then where we can be able to say, yes, we are confident and comfortable with this going forward, or if we are still saying, nah, we're still not really in favor of it.
There is an abstainment.
And there is an abstain too, thank you.
We can do that.
So we can abstain also if we want to. I think one of the things that we need to consider, just based on what the mayor was telling us, especially when she talked about an intergovernmental agreement, and the surplus coming back to the taxing bodies, I think that's important to keep in mind too. And I don't know, I'm assuming that's something that would be worked out.
Yeah, and I'd like to say something about that.
Yes, go ahead.
Because it was mentioned at a previous meeting that we received surplus in the past and we haven't rebated it back or abated it back.
Mhm.
But I have to remind everybody that this library has reduced its levy. We are the only agency that's ever reduced its levy 3 years in a row in 2017, 18, 19. And that has ramifications, compounding ramifications over years. So that is why we haven't rebated back or abated back any surpluses, because actually lowering your levy does more for the taxpayers than an abatement would do. So I just wanted to make that clear to everybody. So the UTI reimbursement, I think, still makes sense for us. Moving forward, however, if the board decides to either abstain or say yes, because either one of those would move this forward. An abstention right now, I think, still would be a yes for the TIF moving forward. But the board would make a decision on whether or not to abate any additional increment from like East Ogden. And then the same from Route 53. So that would be a decision to be made forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so one thing she didn't say that we should have confirmed with her, but this vote for the East Ogden TIF, this is voted down, then they have to start all over again. We can't keep continuing it. I was kind of under the impression that we could have another, round of questions and everything, but this is kind of it. And if we say no and it gets voted down, then they start all over again. If we're in the majority, all of the bodies do that. So that's just something, to remember that we
Bear in
can't.
mind, they don't need our vote.
Yeah.
Right. Oh,
It's the
absolutely.
village
Right.
board
They can
and-
do what
and
they
four
want.
trustees
Right.
moving forward.
Exactly.
So
So,
ours
yeah.
is purely recommendation.
Right. But this is it on this one. So it's do or die for them to decide.
But they have 30 days, right? If the other people say no,
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 not for this.
not with this one. This is it. You can only carry it on for so long.
Yeah, I think the other one.
There's time on the
Right.
53 one. Right. So,
I think where I'm at is in support of the Ogden TIF, but I'd like to see the presentation for the 53 TIF.
Well, let's just talk about the Ogden one
Yeah.
first. I
Perfect.
just want to talk solely on the East Ogden one. We'll talk about the Route 53 after, okay?
My stance was never about the increase in taxes or the decision of whether or not that was a good idea. It was purely about information. And my needs for information have been met. I can see a clear use case. I understand the impact to my constituents. It was never, I did not run on a platform of reducing taxes or reducing levies. It was on increasing services and benefiting the community overall. I want to see growth and improvement. So given that my questions on information have been answered, I'm fully in support of the East Ogden TIF.
Thank you. Liz, do you have any thoughts that you want to share?
No, I think our questions have been answered.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of unknowns that nobody can answer.
I think we have to put our faith in our elected officials, people put their faith in us and know that, they're striving for the best for all of Lisle, and even the unincorporated portions are gonna benefit, by having, more sales tax revenue and things like that, down the road if we get things, moving over there, because, our home values, you pointed out last time that we pay so much more in taxes than Naperville does, and so that's gonna come back to hurt us, our cute little town, we might pay the price down the road if we can't get some more development going with
Karen?
that.
nothing at this time.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
No concerns. I agree with Josh. I think it just seemed like we had a lot of holes in the information that had been provided, and the back and forth had been a little bit messy, maybe. And now I feel I'm more confident with the information we have.
Okay. So do we, I kind of agree with that as well. I realize I didn't say how I felt. I was just asking everyone else how they felt and didn't say about me. I feel better having asked Mayor Mullen questions this evening and her responses. And so I also feel comfortable with an I vote for the East Ogden TIF. Are we a consensus then, yes, that to vote to direct our director to say we are in favor of the East Ogden TIF?
Yes.
Aye,
Yeah.
yes.
Aye.
General consensus. It's not a vote, we're not
Straw
voting on
poll.
anything, it's not an action item, it's just a consensus.
Yeah.
Okay. So for that one, yes. Okay, now Route 53. I will talk first for that one instead of letting you guys go around. I feel like I still need more information on that one. I am not in a position right now where I feel comfortable saying aye or nay or abstain. I feel like we don't have enough. I appreciated that she gave us some more information about the situation, but I feel like we have some more questions to be answered there. So that's how I feel. We'll go around this way this time. So Debbie, go ahead.
So I kind of understand that as well. I feel like I understand more of what's going on over there now, and that it really, what a TIF is for and what our role in is, and so kind of with saying that, I think I can go ahead and feel comfortable supporting it at this time.
Okay.
But,
Thank you, Karen.
No, we need more information.
Okay. Thank you, Laura.
I agree with Karen and with you, Emily. Yeah,
Okay.
more information needed.
Liz?
More info,
Okay.
please.
Josh?
I actually want to see them expand that. My only issue with that TIF is that it only addresses some of the properties in the floodplain and not all of them. And it's the one thing I don't agree with is carving out part of that if they've addressed it from basically Burlington southward and then Ogden northward, and there's a corridor that just happens to be where I lived for 15 years that's excluded. So I think there are a couple of different competing priorities at the village, and this is a little bit more of a resident hat than a board member hat, but I would like to see that more comprehensively addressed. And so not only would I like more information, but I would also like to make a suggestion that they reevaluate that to include the entirety of the stormwater remediation, because it's not ideal in that area.
Okay, thank you, Vanessa.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see the presentation on Wednesday, see what they have to say before we make a decision on that one.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Okay, so we're a no for that one for right now. Perfect. Okay, so then our last item on the agenda for the special meeting is to adjourn. May I have a motion and a second?
I move to adjourn.
Second?
I will second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned at 7:22 PM.